Madam Speaker, and congratulations on your elevation to sitting in the chair. What a tired, negative and hostile speech we had from the Prime Minister this afternoon. Obviously, Hawaii didn't work any holiday magic. We had no fresh ideas, no vision, no energy, unlike the previous speaker who had a lot of energy but no ideas, and a complete failure to engage with the major challenges facing Aotearoa New Zealand. But at least the environment got a mention this year, which it didn't last year. But when the Prime Minister and his ministers and other MPs and National talk about the environment, they talk about natural resources, not about nature. And that epitomises National's attitude to the environment. Nature is primarily something to be exploited for economic gain. That's why the Prime Minister talks about opening up our oceans to foreign corporates for environmentally risky deep-sea drilling, not about the need to protect Maui dolphin by effective controls on fishing. So to National, nature and our environment are not about our landscapes, they're not about our Indigenous plants and wildlife that contribute to our identity as New Zealanders. It's not about safeguarding the places that we treasure, our national parks, places that we go camping besides rivers, beaches, places that many Kiwis like to spend their summer. It's not about that. Once upon a time, under former Prime Minister Jim Bolger with Bill Birch, those ministers went tramping. They understood something about our national parks, what it is to crest the high country, to stand on a ridge and listen to the kea, what it is to wander through beech forests, and what it is to experience some of the magic of those places. Yet under this government, we have an enthusiastic interventionist that Nick Smith was as Minister of Local Government. He intervened to axe the Regional Council to promote irrigation development in Canterbury. He intervened to weaken water conservation orders. He intervened to draft legislation which would has increased ministerial powers to direct and interfere with local councils. But as the new recycled Minister of Conservation, will we see him intervening to protect our Southwest World Heritage Area, to protect Fiordland and Mount Aspiring National Parks against the ill-conceived root burn tunnel proposal? Will he intervene to protect that Great Walk? No. He will probably just leave it to a second-tier official in the Department of Conservation, because under this government, National intervenes to tip the playing field in favour of development and in favour of its business mates. We've seen that at Sky City, we've seen that with the Irrigation Fund, helping irrigators with a subsidy, we've seen that with National taking an axe to the RMA, we've seen it by making it easier in the Crown Minerals Bill for mining to take place on conservation land, so that the Minister of Energy as well as the Minister of Conservation will decide applications. National doesn't intervene in favour of nature and the environment. It intervenes always in favour of an exploitation of nature. John Key is afraid to talk about the environment because he knows his government's policy choices are toxic to the environment. The Prime Minister said this afternoon that the government was planning to introduce a package of reforms around water quality and the way we manage fresh water. But when the Prime Minister talks about building on the work of the Land and Water Forum, what he really means is watering down the forum's recommendations and cherry-picking. When we've got a government which is trying to hide the extent and the seriousness of our water quality problems by ditching the consolidated nationwide state of the environment reporting that we used to have until late last year, when we have a government which is proud to be the only country in the OECD that doesn't have independent environmental reporting, I don't expect the water reform package to improve the outlook for our rivers, for our lakes and our aquifers. I expect to see more of what irrigators want, like tradable water rights, which will further complicate water management in New Zealand, but increase the opportunity for consent holders to profit from any water that they are not using. This summer we've had numerous stories in the media about water pollution. Toxic algae in Hawke's Bay killing a dog. Last weekend in Marlborough, we had the Taylor River raft race run along the river bank because of elevated levels of bacteria in the river and low flows. And the reason for that, Marlborough District Council said that those high bacterial levels were partly because of runoff from link water, an area of intensive dairying. We've seen mussel farmers at Collingwood and Golden Bay unable to harvest their mussels because of contaminants in the Aorere River. We've seen the Matiri, Mangles, Matakitaki rivers, again, not fit for swimming, elevated bacterial levels, kayakers reporting infected cuts. And as one kayaker recently emailed to me, Murchison has a population of around 700 people and a sewage plant, but an estimated cow population of over 10,000. That's the equivalent of more than 140,000 people, but with no sewage plant. And yet what's National planning to do? Spend $80 million subsidising irrigation. It wants to push people off welfare payments to make it easier for agribusiness to create more dairy farms. I came back from Arthur's Pass on Sunday. When you leave the national park, shortly after that you see Lake Grasmere. It's one of the scenic gems of the Canterbury High Country. Yet what has happened there? We've had Mr Morrison, one of the principals of the Central Plains Water Development, clearing all the Matagauri adjacent to the road, using his digger, using his bulldozer, and putting the land ready for more intensive farming and irrigation development, all with impunity. No obvious intervention from Environment Canterbury or the Selwyn District Council. The fact that he is bulldozing those Matagauri shrublands, proposing to do intensive farming in the catchment of Lake Grasmere, will be an absolute tragedy for the lake, because it will end up totally polluting that lake, which has got at the moment very high water quality. Yet National won't put limits on dairying development through a strong national policy statement. We only have a weak national policy statement. The Minister for the Environment talked about National spending money on clean-up initiatives. Those programs were implemented and started by the previous government. And what the Minister fails to recognise is that if you're spending money on clean-up at the same time as you're subsidising irrigation, you are just compounding the problem, so taxpayers are paying twice. Amy Adams called water our most valuable natural resource and said New Zealand must make the most of this vital resource. But I didn't hear anything in the Minister's speech about protecting our rivers and lakes, protecting their fishing values, their swimming values through stronger water conservation orders. It was all about development. Government plans to reform the RMA will be more bad news for the environment and organisations like Forest and Bird and Fish and Game that are involved in advocacy to defend the places they love and we love, like the Denniston Plateau and the Mokanui River and the Waitaki River. The Minister talked about the RMA as a barrier to growth, quote unquote. So on Planet Key, good environmental outcomes are where developers are left with the minimum of constraint and paradise is paved over and turned into a parking lot or an irrigation intake within 6 months, of course. Amy Adams talked about inconsistent and inaccurate plans. The Green Party would fix this by having more national policy statements, more national environmental standards to guide councils. National's got a weak NPS on fresh water, and it's failed to finalise the NES on ecological flows, which was notified more than 4 years ago. So National's fix in terms of the RMA Amendment Bill is once again to shaft democratic processes, to give more power to ministers in Wellington and take it away from councils. And we've seen that with National appointing the commissioners for decisions on the Auckland Unitary Plan, not leaving Auckland councillors to appoint those commissioners. So if we're having another raft of changes to the RMA, I suspect that they will be about undermining the powers of councils and putting more and more power in the hands of government. Madam Speaker, a richer New Zealand isn't about more motorways and more irrigation and more mining and more environmental destruction. It's not about something you measure just on a balance sheet. It's measured in the hearts of people across this beautiful country of ours. It's about investing more in the protection of our Indigenous species, which we hold in trust for all humankind, not just New Zealanders. And it's about recognising that our economy, with its strong emphasis on primary production and tourism, depends on a healthy environment. The Green Party would invest in that.
Madam Speaker.
I call John Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to invite the last speaker